Hey friends, I wanted to tell you about something exciting we're doing this year. We're hosting the inaugural Kölsch Cup, and we want you to take part. Every competitor will receive a sweet Kölsch Cup t-shirt, and we will be awarding one Grand Champion trophy to the King of Kölsch, as well as 2 runner-up medalists. All entries will receive our official scorecards, so you'll know how we judged your Kölsch. And you can learn more by going to KölschCup.com and signing up today. Bonus, top-tier members of our Patreon community will get 1 free entry into the competition, which is great because top-tier members who will be receiving January's recipe kit are getting our famous true-to-style Kölsch shipped out with a pack of Imperial Dieter. I can hardly contain my excitement, so again, go to KölschCup.com for more details and sign up today to reserve your spot.
Entertaining shows with content that spreads information and sparks discourse throughout the community. This is the Pearl Media Network.
I have to hit unmute. I do this every week. Hey guys, welcome to the Homebrew Happy Hour. This is the show where we supply the answers to your homebrewing questions and discuss all things related to craft beer. If you have a question you would like us to discuss on a future episode, you can go to homebrewhappyhour.com and click on that submit a question link at the top of the page. Or now you can call or text them in. Where is it at? 325-305-6107. I am your host, Joshua Stubing, and I left Todd at home. I left James at home. I said, guys, I'm going to do this show on my own. The audience has been begging for it. Y'all are taking up too much time with all your jibber jabber and your goofy small talk and your short one-liners that always fall short and no one thinks they're fun. No, that's the feedback about me. No, actually, today is one of those awesome episodes where we do a Homebrewer Showcase. It's been a while since we've done that. Y'all have mentioned that to me in my email and on our socials. So I thought I'd bring in... I was going to call you Queen Cider, but no, you're Miss Cider on Instagram. It's Corrie Purser. You are a, let me read the things that I wrote down for you. A gluten-free ciderist and homebrewer out of California who is a popular Instagram at Miss_Cider, which is focused on hard ciders, meads, and beer making. Corrie, how are you doing today?
I'm well. How are you?
Fantastic. Really good. It's beautiful weather. I was telling you before we hit record, we put a bid on a house a few days ago, or we put a bid, I mean, it feels like a month. We put a bid on it and they rejected it. And I was like, okay, and try again. And then they rejected it. And I was like, man, I feel like a loser. They did some good psychology on me because I was like, fine, we'll give you more money. And they're like, okay. And that was last night where they're like, okay, we'll take your money. And I was like, oh my God, they actually took it. I mean, because it was a lot more money. And so today I'm like frantically, my office is a bombshell and my house is, I'm just totally tearing it down. And, but the weather is nice. So yeah, I'm doing good. And you're in California. I get so jealous of y'all, mainly because of weather. It seems like it's always good. You're in LA too, right?
Yeah. Every time that I'm on a meeting at work, we do like these openers about how our weekend went. And I'm always like, oh yeah, I either went snowboarding at Big Bear or I went to the beach and I was roller skating. And they're always like, all right, Corrie, who's going to top you today?
How dare you, first off, that you're able to do both of those and it not be weird. Like when you're at the beach, it's comfortable at the beach. And when you're snowboarding, it's cold and perfect. Like, how dare California have such perfect climate? First off, I mean, we're going to get into a lot of the nitty gritty about cider, the gluten-free. That's what I was most interested in. But let's talk about you just real quick. Are you born and raised Cali? Is California all you know? Or what's your story of getting you to California and leading up to all the cider stuff and Miss Cider?
Yeah. So I was actually born in Georgia, or I was born in Alabama, but I was raised in Georgia. I attended my undergraduate as well as grad school in Georgia. I went to Georgia State University and I got my master's degree in biochemistry. And what really led me to wanting to get my graduate degree was my issues with having to be gluten-free. I developed an autoimmune disease whenever I was an undergraduate student, and it caused all of my hair to fall out. Yeah, I was completely bald. It was a tremendously stressful time in my life. And I saw 4 dermatologists, I believe, and I was treated in every way that they could treat me at the time. All the treatment methods that were available I tried. And then my hair still was falling out. And so that's what led me to wanting to get my degree in biochemistry and kind of move towards the drug development world.
Wow. Like, I'm balding because I'm middle-aged and I abuse my body. Yeah, that's got to be traumatic. I mean, because in undergrad, well, you're talking 19 years old, basically.
I was like 21, 22 whenever it was happening as well.
That's wild. And like, I know from family experience with autoimmune disease that like my mother-in-law, who they thought she had Crohn's for the last decade, and now it's something else. Like that now they're approaching it with autoimmune issues or disorder. Is disorder the right way? Autoimmune deficiency disorder?
It's disease.
Disease. Okay, I knew it was a D word. Autoimmune diseases, like they don't have it pet down, right? Like, I mean, it can change in a heartbeat, and it's kind of, is it trial and error for you, and that's how you got to the dietary side of it?
So I got to the dietary side of it by reading a lot of journal articles that were published by scientists. There was one scientist in particular at Columbia University that found this genetic relation between my autoimmune disease, which is alopecia areata, with celiac disease, as well as rheumatoid arthritis. She found that they had similar genetic mutations. So I just kind of extrapolated that if the gluten-free diet is effective for people who have celiac disease, then maybe it could possibly be effective for me. So then I started cutting out gluten and my hair started to come back. But then it was still falling out as well. Like it would come back, but then I would notice it falling out and I would be like, what's happening? Like, why does gluten sometimes work, but being gluten-free sometimes work? And why does it not? And then I did what a lot of people who are on like autoimmune disease forums and stuff do. They follow this elimination diet. And so they'll cut like everything that could possibly be an allergen out of their diet. No soy, no eggs, no dairy, no gluten, no nightshade vegetables even. So I did that. I cut like everything out. And then I slowly started reintroducing things back to my diet. And then it came down to just gluten and dairy for me for a time being. And then most recently, I've noticed an issue whenever I eat eggs.
Oh my gosh. And you know, we kind of talked about it pre-show where I was like, I live on eggs. We all we really talk about on this show is my love of Kölsch. And that's how it should be because it's beer. I eat an omelet pretty much every day of my life. And sometimes I have two. I have it for breakfast and lunch. And my doctor, because my cholesterol is in like that stage where you don't have to take medicine, but they're like, hey man, you need to lower that number. And he's like, maybe lower it on the edge. And I'm looking for a new doctor because I don't want that kind of negativity in my life. That's terrible. No, but it is. So I'm curious though, because like, were you drinking at all in undergrad, you know, like during that time where you're yeah, right. You're an enthusiast. When did alcohol bring itself back? And ever since you started attacking it dietarily, did you start off with gluten-free since you saw success with that, you know, with how your autoimmune disease was responding to you being gluten-free?
So whenever I was an undergraduate student, I just wore wigs mostly while I was trying to go, you know, the dermatologist route and get treatment, what was available through that, you know, what was viable through the FDA. And the methods that they treated me, they would be effective for a time being, but then it would be like an immunosuppressant that you can't be on for an extended amount of time. And so I'd have to come off of it and then my hair would start falling out again. But yeah, during that whole time I was drinking, I was in college, you know, I was in a sorority, we went to parties and, you know, it never was in my mind that it could ever be a dietary issue because it always sounded like it was more like genetics. And I was like, well, why all of a sudden is like this genetic expression happening later in my life? Is it like due to undue stress in my life or, you know, I was a chemistry major. So yeah, of course my life was stressful and I was in college. So these were very difficult things for me to kind of like understand. And I really wanted to understand it from like a scientific perspective. And that's whenever I started doing a lot of searches on like Google Scholar and looking for scientific journals that would help me fully understand like the disease mechanism behind what was happening. But there really wasn't a lot of research out there until I came across a journal article from a scientist at Columbia University who also suffers from alopecia areata. She is a dermatologist as well as having a PhD. And so she does a lot of clinical research on this disease, and she found a genetic correlation between alopecia areata, celiac disease, and rheumatoid arthritis.
Oh my goodness. First off, God bless the internet. Am I right? Because you're I always say it about home brewing. It's the best time in the world to be a home brewer. Like, thanks to all the tools in this supercomputer in my hand that I can just pull up. But for you, what would have been 100 years ago trying to deal with this? You would have had some leeches on your arm, and you would have been bloodletting and just wearing WIDs or whatever, right? Like, you probably wouldn't have it figured out if your local area didn't have the information available to you. But also, you're obviously a very bright human being that comes across, because like me with, like my balding or my beer gut, I'm a caveman. I'm like, what is causing that? I know what's causing it ultimately, or I don't want to really look it up. It's like, oh, if I lessened the breakfast cereal, maybe that can't be it. It's something else. It's probably bad genetics, but that is super cool that you're able to utilize all that technology and get to it yourself.
Well, as a trained chemist, it's just kind of like something that's, you're trained to do. You're trained to kind of like find these issues and think of a way to solve them. And for me, it was just like consuming all of the literature that I could, just because I couldn't physically be doing the research myself because I wasn't yet in grad school. So that was my way of controlling, if even, what was happening to me.
And is your professional career, without giving too much details, because we got weirdos listening to the show, is it related as well to being able to further because you seem like you're obviously heavily invested in this because it affects you, and that's what caused you, like you said, to do the research on your own. In that, is this bleed into your professional life too, or you're able to focus on this professionally as well? Because like you're in the science field, so or is it kind of still just personal passion project and work is something totally unrelated?
So it's kind of morphed over time. Whenever I attended grad school, I attended it for the purpose of learning how to do drug development. So that way I could understand how drugs are made, what researchers do to understand disease, and, just learn that whole process from the bench to FDA approval. And so what I did in grad school is I worked on a protein-based MRI contrast agent for targeting cancer in the body. So it seems kind of unrelated in a way, but I also learned a lot about like biocompatibility and how researchers really kind of target disease and fully understand disease before they even start developing a drug for it. And they kind of think of the best way to do that. Like, they don't just throw, shots in the dark kind of thing. They really kind of try to think about the most effective way to target disease and how they want to make a drug that's not going to have harsh side effects. They want something that, people who maybe have a gene knockdown that are living life today, can we knock down that gene in other people who, could live life the similar way that this other subpopulation are? They really try to think in depth about how they're going to go about that. And so that's what I really wanted to learn. But then I came across that article and I just kind of thought, well, if, people who have celiac disease can live life without consuming gluten, then maybe this is an option for me and my autoimmune disease, since these things are genetically related. And so that's whenever I went the dietary route, and I really found a solution for myself going the dietary route.
See, it worked, right? Yeah. Sorry, I'm sorry. I totally interrupted you. I'll just say we're not that different. That drug development was also my focus in college, but I told you before I dropped out for that reason. Different drug development, but we, I'd be remiss if I didn't. Well, first off, that I see that tap. It took me a little bit to notice that tap behind you. I'm assuming it's cider's on tap.
Always.
Always. So let's start off with your background in history with brewing, with making cider, because that's something on this show we don't talk a lot about, mainly because the three main hosts, me, James, and Todd, none of us have ever made cider. We consume it. There's in Austin East Ciders is the name of a very popular commercial cidery, delicious ciders, but it's not been, and I know it's terribly easy to make too. We've had Heidi on the show, West Coast Witches Brewing. She's on Instagram as well. She was on the show, I think not October 2020, but it was October 2019. And I'm super interested in every time. I'm like, I'm going to go make cider now. And then I don't. So let's start off with your background and history. What got you into cider, and how long have you been making your own cider?
So like I said, whenever I was in grad school, I lived in Atlanta and I was gluten-free at that point after I read, all of the publications that I could. And my girlfriend actually took me to Urban Tree in Atlanta. They had just opened. And that was like my first, I feel like real time having cider, because before that, of course, I've had cider. I've had Woodchuck, I've had Angry Orchard, but it just doesn't beat like actually going to a cidery though. And so, she took me there to Urban Tree, and I was just like, wow, I really love this selection. And it was just like the first time that I had like a large selection of something that wasn't just a very sweet cider or a very sweet perry. So it was really exciting. And that's kind of what piqued my interest into it. But shortly after that, I moved to Los Angeles, and I moved to downtown Los Angeles. And right here in downtown LA, there's not any cideries. But whenever you go outside and kind of like the more suburb areas, then you come across more cideries. So it wasn't just something like that was down the road that I could just pop over and, have a Sunday fun day and drink all day and, get home safely without having to Uber, So yeah, I just was like, okay, well, I'm going to start homebrewing, and I'm going to do it out of my LA apartment. And then I started.
How long did it, how long have you been doing it? And what were any hiccups? Like, did you just buy a kit? Did you use YouTube? Like, again, the golden age of brewing now for homebrewers because of technology at our hands. And I'm assuming based off of all that you went over for dealing with your autoimmune disease, like, how to research stuff. Like, how did you get because when I look at what you're posting, the stuff, you brew in confidence. Like, you're very, and it comes across that, like, I've never had your ciders, but I'm like, man, that's a good cider. I can tell. Like, you obviously have gotten past what some brewers have, that shyness, where they're like, I'm brewing, but you could try it, but just remember, it's not that good. My wife does that too with cooking all the time. She's like, just try this. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. It's not that good, but it is good. I just have to mess with her. But how did you, did you find any hiccups or hurdles before you got into the groove of like, yes, I am a cider maker?
Well, brewing cider for me felt very similar to the drug development that I did, because I would produce protein from bacteria. And so in order for me to extract the protein from bacteria, I had to grow large vats of bacteria to extract from. And so a lot of times I feel like the contamination issues that you have in brewing are very similar to the drug development that I was doing in grad school. You have to make sure that everything is clean and sanitized before you begin. You have to make sure that nothing's contaminating your bacteria whenever you go in to check on it. You have to make sure that conditions are in good, you have good conditions for things to grow. So it was just very similar to the work that I had done previously. And so I just kind of followed that kind of training that I already had in producing protein from bacteria and making alcohol.
What was your first, like, did you go online and type cider making kit, or did you start from scratch knowing, because cider's different than brewing beer, and it's more, I always tell people it's more grocery store friendly in that you can get what you need from most 95% of grocery stores and go home and start making cider, as opposed to like, I got to find this specific strain of yeast and I got to get these grains. Like my local grocery store doesn't have grains, right? I can't just go and pick up malted barley and start brewing. But cider, on the other hand, is pretty accessible for any person interested in doing it, right? So what was your first steps in doing it? Did you buy a kit from some retailer, or did you just go to your grocery store and start at it?
So I did buy a kit, but it wasn't like a cider making kit. It was just like a regular like brewing kit, like a basic brewing kit with a carboy, siphon, all the things that you need to kind of start. And then I can't remember where I got my juice the first time, because at first I can't remember if I was crushing apples yet my first time or if I got the juice. But now I'm crushing apples. But previously maybe I wasn't, and I didn't have a keg then either, and I was bottle conditioning. So yeah, it was like the very basics that I started with: a carboy, siphon, bottles to kind of bottle. And I wasn't the biggest fan of it, just because like I didn't have any control over the carbonation. And I knew that part of that was like maybe like temperature fluctuations. And, you know, it's so warm here in California. And I feel like it's hard to kind of get the carbonation exactly the way that you want it to be whenever you're bottle conditioning. Of course, you know, there's wonderful people that bottle condition and they make amazing ciders and they're so good. But for me and where I live, I just didn't think that that was achievable. And so that's whenever I upgraded to a kegerator and I started force carbonating.
You're in good company. We don't like bottling. And it's nothing again. I mean, the people, we have a lot of listeners. Every time I say this, they'll message in. It's like, you're wrong. Bottling's good for us. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, nerd. It's good for you. I get it. But like having a kegerator and kegs and like the forced carb is my favorite part about the keg. It's my favorite part mainly because it's immediate satisfaction. You know, like I can scratch the itch immediately. I got it's secondary's done. We're going to transfer into the keg. We forced carb. It's at temperature. An hour later, Todd pours right away. I'm like, I'm going to give it an hour. That's like my sweet spot. And then pouring, I'm like, with bottles, a week on the low end? You know, if you're letting it bottle condition, like it takes some time for that carbon. And again, the only batch I've ever bottled was with Todd, and those were way overcarbed. And you can't come back from that, right? You pop it, you let it sit for a little while, and then you can pour, and that helps. But you're like you said, I like control as well. I'm a control freak with as much as I can, and kegging is the best. Real quick, do you have anything on tap right now?
I don't have anything on tap right now. What I actually have is some cider from a bottle.
Hey.
So I bottled it after kegging.
Nice. And do you use some counter pressure bottle filler or?
Not yet. That's my
need one.
That's my next upgrade for sure.
We'll get you the hookup. We'll call John Blickman. I know, John, you watch this show. I know you do. Hook her up with a beer gun. I need to get paid for how much I promote the beer gun because I love that tool. I hate bottling, but the beer gun makes bottling from the keg enjoyable, or at least not terrible. Whatever. So it's not enjoyable because I'm still bottling, but it's not terrible.
Yeah.
And that's very valuable to me to not hate myself, because when I'm harping on this and I can hear the hate mail typing out right now. Bottling is not enjoyable because of how tedious it is for me. I'm a man of luxury and efficiency, and the keg is not as tedious. You know, you can sanitize the keg right before you're about to like, you don't, there's not a whole problem.
Bottles. Let's not even talk about that.
I know, right? That's what I'm saying. Cleaning bottles is terrible, and peeling out, like it's just not fun. Terrible. Some people, again, have written me in before, like, I like it. It's therapeutic. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to, whatever you're into, pal. I'm not here to judge. I'm just a voice behind a microphone. But I'm very interested because we talked about a little bit pre-show, like you being gluten-free was never a choice. Like, you know, and a lot of people choose it for various health reasons, or they have a minor intolerance, or they have a massive intolerance and they feel the effects. Alcohol in most, you know, we're in the best time ever probably for being gluten-free because of available options. But how was it? How has it been? Because it's still your current experience navigating the realm of alcohol, of booze, of beer and cider and mead and staying gluten-free. And is it a nightmare? Like, because in California, you're in beer mecca. Is there a lot of options for you because it's beer mecca and cider, you know, is picking up as well there? Or do you still have a hard time when you go out with friends or whatever, pre-COVID? Obviously, everybody listening, pre-COVID, going out, is it hard navigating that space and being 100% gluten-free?
It's tricky. Sometimes it's very easy and other times it's very hard. Sometimes I'll go places like on the slopes and I will not at all expect them to have a gluten-free beer. But most recently I went to, I believe it was Solitude Mountain in Utah, and I asked for cider and they were out of cider. And then they were like, well, we have a hard seltzer too, but we're out of that. But we have this gluten-free beer, and it was New Planet. And I was so excited. And I was like, what? I did not even expect you to have a gluten-free beer. And you know, and that was just what it was. And I would have gone for the cider and not even known that they had New Planet if they would have had it, you know? So sometimes things like that surprises me. And other times, you know, I'll go to the grocery store and they won't have like any good selection at all. Like, you know, like Ralph's is out here. Sometimes it's Kroger in other regions, but for here it's Ralph's. They're like sister stores or whatever. And, they'll have, what's commercially available, everyone knows about, Angry Orchard, Red Bridge, and so I can sometimes drink those, sure, but other times I want, more variety, more of a selection. So I'll have to hit up like the bottle shop that's here in downtown LA is what I'll go to a lot of times, like specialty shops, sometimes like a Bevmo. But most of the time it's like more of the smaller specialty shops, like the bottle shops that I'll be hitting up just because it's more local to me. And yeah, whenever I go out to drink like at a bar and things like that, I have to be careful because of the cocktails that are being made. I have to be careful if I don't know if the distillation process really removes gluten or not. I don't have the data in front of me. I'm a scientist. So of course, in theory, it should be removed because of the distillation process. But like I said, I don't have that data in front of me. I don't know, what the contents really are. And I don't know what the effect is until maybe a couple of days later. And I notice chunks of my hair missing. So, it's not an option for me to not have hair. I'm sure that there's other people in the world that's like, oh, you have such a full set of hair. Like, why does it matter if you lose a few strands? Try the beer. And I've done that before in the past, but the older that I get, I've heard this from other people who have gluten issues, the more sensitive you become. So I've noticed, it used to be just a few strands and I can deal with that. But now it's like, it becomes like more of a spiraling effect for me. And I have to like pinpoint where the gluten is. And so whether it be in a cocktail or, maybe there's some hidden gluten somewhere in my diet. Like the other day I got kimchi and I did not expect kimchi to have gluten in it, but the kimchi I was eating had gluten in it. So I immediately had to toss that and be like, nope, can't have it.
That's nuts. Only because it's a big trust game, right? Like when you go out, if you're going to drink from a local cidery or a beer that's labeled as gluten-free, because I'll argue that that's a new space for a lot of breweries still. It's still in its infancy in the commercial spectrum. In my opinion, someone's going to write in and tell me how wrong I am. But I remember 2013 or 2014, we were at Great American Beer Festival in Denver. Fantastic festival. And I remember Sierra Nevada had one to try. And they got so much flack for it because, the uber machismo that people at this festival were like, oh, gluten-free, and then like if you actually talk to them, they're like, well, it's stemmed because there's this market for it because there's a lot of people who want to enjoy beer and they can't because, like they were explaining it nicely to the drunkards who are like, oh, you sissy for, because there's some weird stigma about gluten-free where it's either like, oh, you white person on a fad diet, as opposed to like, no, I have an autoimmune disease and I'm losing all my hair. And like, I still want to enjoy beer though, or cider.
I will say I'm not mad at the fad dieters though, because it makes it more available to me. Like the more people that there is a segment of this market that is interested in gluten-free food or beverages, the more things become available to me. And plus sometimes those fad dieters are some of my friends that are doing it because they're with me.
That's so nice. I was one of those. That's why I have street cred to make fun of myself. In 2012, I'm 5'8". My wife's not here to argue with me. I'm 5'7"3/4, and she rounds down to 5'7". But anyway, I'm like 5'8", and in 2012 I was 231 pounds and just a chunker. My people, if I was a baby, they'd say, "Look at that healthy baby." And my doctor had me read this book called Wheat Belly. And some cardiologist, Dr. Williams or I forget his name, Dr. Davis. And either way, it scared me to death. I was like, I'm gonna stroke out in my 30s if I don't do something because my blood pressure. And so I cut out wheat, grain, and sugar for 3 months. And that's when I had started training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I was doing that twice a week. And I still train that, but my body, I eat differently now. But I lost 54 pounds in like a little over 3.5 months. Just from the dietary change. Was mainly because the jiu-jitsu, it's a great workout, but the diet, it just started flying off. And it was nuts to me how my body was responding when I was putting better things in it. Not just what I was cutting out, but when my intake, you know what I mean? Like for me, for fad dieters, like you said, I'll give them credit that as much as I love making fun of them because I make fun of everybody, you're right. It makes restaurants more aware of a market because they're going to do what makes them money. So they're like, we have all these people coming in and asking for Caesar salads with no crouton or whatever it is. Like
I can't have Caesar salad because of the dressing. Usually the dressing has wheat in it.
See, even then, I was a poser. I was such a poser. I'd like my Caesar salad, but no croutons. I'm gluten intolerant. When really I was just trying to lose some weight. But you're right, though. I should give people more credit because the more popular a thing will become, the more corporations, companies, even mom and pop shops are going to respond to it if there's a market there. And that does exponentially benefit you because you were on the slopes in Utah in the middle of nowhere, able to drink a beer because they obviously saw the market for it, right? They're not just going to let beer sit on the tap for months and not selling any. That's counterproductive. But when you start, you said you had gotten like the carboy and all that. Are you still brewing or can we call it brewing for cider making?
I call it cider making usually if you're very staunch about
I am. And I was thinking about it. I was like, because what would be the brew part?
Yeah, that's the thing. There's no brew part.
There is no brew part. Yeah. I say I brew tea, but I don't know if that's correct either. Like I brew kombucha. I think I brew it. Maybe I just make it. I think I just make it. I don't brew anything. When you're making cider, have you upgraded equipment or are you still able to produce the volume that you want to produce with the starting equipment that you had?
At first, I just had one or two glass carboys, I believe. Two glass carboys for secondary. And then my friend who was also interested in brewing was moving and he had a ton of carboys and some other equipment that he wanted to get rid of. So he gave me like all of his carboys. And then I bought a BrewTech brewing bucket, which nice. Oh yes. And so then I was able to brew, I went from maybe being able to brew 5 gallons to easily 15 gallons at a time, maybe 20.
And are you doing the same batch in that volume, or are you doing a bunch of different 5 gallons to keep the variety going?
Yeah, it's usually a bunch of different 5 gallons. So I'll do a sweet, I'll do a dry, I'll do a hopped, and those are usually my go-tos. Sometimes I'll add a fruit if I can get my hands on the fruit. My apples are the easiest for me to get my hands on, but the fruit part is harder. I'll have to go to a farmer's market or talk to someone that's a farmer to try to get, a large quantity of fruit to be able to add it in.
So something you said earlier that I was waiting to touch on, it seems like you're not interested in like puree or apple juice. You liked the whole hands-on experience. What made you want to do that? Because again, as a man who is lazy, I was trying to think of the nice way to say it. Just going and buying juice. That seems like a no-brainer. I'm going to do it. Were you doing it for the control or were you doing it because you like saving money? Like what was the thought? Because that seems like work to have to crush your apple. Because how many apples is for any given batch?
So for 15 gallons, I usually go through about 200 pounds of apples.
That's so much. So was it for
and
control?
That's really inefficient though. I feel like I could, if I had like a hydraulic press and like the whole work, then I could, get a lot more efficiency out of that. But I just have like one of those hand cranked, presses, and it's more tedious. It really is.
But again, it was because you wanted the control of the whole process, or what was?
No, it wasn't really the control. At first I thought that it was fun. It's kind of fun and aesthetically pleasing to kind of like get a bunch of apples from the farmer's market. Oh, just that process of like going to the farmer's market, talking to the farmers, and getting a big bunch of apples. And that was just like a lot of fun to me. And also it's like visually appealing for Instagram whenever you're crushing apples and juicing them. So maybe sometimes control, because if you go to the grocery store and you get apple juice, like it might have preservatives or additives that you don't want in there. So I know whenever I'm pressing apples, I'm getting nothing but the pure apple juice product. But then I attended conferences like CiderCon, for example, and you learn that you can use fallen apples from orchards. You don't have to, buy the good grade of apples that are direct to consumer kind of for consumption. You can buy, the lesser quality apples because you're going through a process whenever you're brewing. And so any bacteria or anything that would have been in these apples that are of lesser quality kind of like get processed out. It's because I add sulfites to my cider. So I make sure that, I have a very clean batch of cider before I start adding yeast. But now I have a friend that works in food production. And so anytime that she has apples that she's about to toss because she doesn't need them due to quality reasons or due to testing reasons, maybe they tested at a lower sugar content than she needed for, her final product, she would call me up and she'd be like, hey, I have a bunch of apples that I'm about to get rid of. Do you want them? And so I'm like, yeah. And so, it's kind of fun because I'm still getting apples for free, which is of course amazing. But also, it's like less of a food waste issue, like I'm kind of like saving these apples from going to waste.
No, yeah, that's totally like part of the whole, like a sustainability model that you're able to do that. Because, yeah, how many grocery stores or places are pitching food? A lot of it's liability, I'm assuming, why they're just pitching it, because I go get it from their dumpster. I've never done that, but hypothetically, I go get it from the dumpster and I choke on it or something. Then the liability of like, or if they gave it out to me and I did the same thing, like, oh, we can't get sued because we tried to give out free bread or whatever.
Right.
But that is interesting. I am curious because we have a lot of people listening who might be interested in cider. Would you say that the carboys you use for cider or the equipment you're using can be the same? Like they can, if they have a carboy that's not being used right now, they can use it for cider and have no issue going back and forth in between. Is there any sort of cross-contaminant between the types of yeast being used that you would worry about? Obviously, we're all assuming everyone's very clean and sanitizing and using, I like to use iodophor to totally kill all the yeast left back there. The BTF iodophor from National Chemicals has been super good for us to eliminate contaminants. But would you say it's okay using equipment between batches of beer and cider?
I haven't gone back and forth like that before with the yeast that I use. I'm usually pretty consistent with the type of yeast that I use. In the beginning, I kind of was testing things out, but now I have like a go-to for my process. So I don't have a lot of experience doing that, but I would say to be careful if you're going from making beer to making something like a cider because you want it to be gluten-free for your friends. Mm-hmm. Because I know that there's a lot of people who have issues with the tiniest amount of gluten being left over and residual in after it touching, a frying pan, for example. So there's a lot of people who have like that strong of a gluten intolerance that the tiniest amount of gluten really affects them. And there's actually a Facebook group that talks a lot about that. I think it's called Zero Tolerance on Facebook. And, there's a lot of people on that give each other tips on, what do I need to do to make sure that there's no contamination in this for my friend? So that's something to keep in mind, I think.
That is, you're right. Because there would be, I know we do have, for the most part, a very welcoming audience where a lot of people are like, hey, I don't like this style of beer, but I want to brew it. How would you do it? Because I have friends who like that and I want to brew for them. So yeah, there's probably a lot of people listening who go, I've never really been interested in gluten beer, but Aunt so-and-so or my friend or whatever who's wanted to try my beer, but doesn't want to, at best, have just a stomach ache and at worst, have hair all over the place. Like they just won't drink it, right? That is a great idea. You're right. So it might be worth keeping it separate just for that sake. But that leads me to a great question. In your opinion, what's the basics they could get away with starting to make cider today? I mean, a bucket, a carboy, and then a keg or bottles. I mean, I can't think of more equipment that they'd need.
Yeah, I don't think that it's necessarily the equipment side of things, unless they do want to press their own apple juice. You need a apple grinder and an apple press for that. But it's more on the ingredient side. Like I add sulfites to my cider, like I said, because I don't want to have any residual natural yeast from the apples or any bacteria. Because like I said, I get poorer quality apples. So I have to really treat my juice before I brew my juice, before I make my cider.
Brew. I like it.
So yeah, for me, that's my standpoint. But there are companies, especially in Los Angeles, that really go that like natural yeast route, and they make these really cool sour ciders because they're brewing from natural yeast, and you just kind of naturally get the sour flavor from it. And I think it just depends on what you're trying to achieve.
Do you have a go-to cider recipe you can send me, and maybe we can even publish it on the site? Because
Yeah.
then that'll get the ball rolling for me to actually do this, and we'll make a video with Todd and James of us doing it for proof that we did it. Because we missed the best time to have cider would have been probably Thanksgiving. Just in my seasonal thinking brain,
I always have a cider on tap during Thanksgiving.
Exactly, and my aunt, who I got into brewing. They got into brewing, and fortunately they listened to the show. They had a cider 2 Thanksgivings ago, and it was incredible. It was real good, and they're like, yeah, it couldn't have been easier. And they use, I think, I forget where the recipe came from, but it was very straightforward. But if you have like a go-to, I'd love to publish it, and that way, like I said, I'm probably not going to press my own apples. I don't have that equipment yet, but maybe that's down the line for us, where we're like, because cider. What I like about having a kegerator and being in the position I'm in, as most homebrewers are, is variety on your taps is a wonderful thing. Like, do you do hard seltzers ever at the house, or do you ever have them on tap? Or when you go out, are you a fan of those, being able to drink those?
I am a fan of hard seltzers. I've never attempted to make a seltzer myself. I've attempted mead before, which I want to get back into more so. But also just like the non-alcoholic things that you can have on tap are really cool. I rigged my one tap kegerator. I don't have just this guy. I've got another kegerator that I put a nitro tap on, and I brewed coffee, and I would have coffee on nitro. And so that's just like you already have the equipment lying around. All that it took was, upgrading your tap, and you can have coffee on nitro.
And isn't cold brew coffee on nitro the best? It's so good.
So good. Yeah.
It's so good.
Creamy, and it has texture, and you don't have to add sugar or milk to it. And
I've been on such a nitro beer kick lately with all these stouts, and I've been the commercial ones specifically because at home I don't have a nitro setup, and all these great ones from Left Hand. Left Hand's been just one of my favorite breweries for forever. And you opening it up, and you hear the little widget, whatever the nitro device in there cans are, and pour it on the cascading, and just how the mouthfeel of nitro. And that's what I love best about nitrogenated cold brew coffee is the mouthfeel. It's so creamy. It's like drinking a cloud of coffee, and that's the best way to drink coffee. But
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I
was just going to jump in and say, and there's some cideries now that have cider on nitro too, and it's really interesting.
Everything needs to be on nitro, I've determined. Like I'm going to do a Kölsch and see what it tastes like on nitro. That's what because it's already like drinking a cloud. I wonder if putting it on nitro is just going to change my life. And if it does, I'm going to be so incessantly annoying on this show when I'm like, guys, you may know Kölsch, but you don't know nitro Kölsch. And I'll be a hipster about it. But anyway, you've had some experience behind you with making ciders. You probably have done a variety of ciders. What is your favorite cider to brew? Is it just a straightforward, like, do you like them sweet? Do you like them dry? Do you like adding additional, or is it just straightforward cider all you need at the end of the day?
I like adding additional flavors. I'll add oak chips if I want to have a cider to have a more oaky kind of flavor to it, which I think is fun because I can kind of get that barrel aged effect without having a barrel that I have to take care of. I'll add hops, which I really love, like that, just that process of like, I usually use whole cone hops whenever
Really?
I brew. Yeah. So I don't like using the pellets. I don't like the mush that comes from it. I'll go down to Southern California, and I'll go to a hops farm, and I'll pick out my hops, and, they'll package it up for me, and it
Must be nice.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. It's a beautiful drive to go down there and to talk to the farmers, and they're just so passionate about the work that they do and telling you all about the hops, and it's just that process and that personal connection that I feel like a lot of people are missing right now.
This episode is brought to you by the California Board of Tourism. Because, it just makes me want to be after I got done skiing about an hour and a half away, then I went to the beach an hour and a half away, then went down to the hop farm. It's ridiculous.
I did do that one day. I went from the hop farm to the beach, but not to the mountains. No.
Yeah, that might be a little bit of a drive, right? Because California, people forget how big California is. I mean, I live in Texas, and we're the best state in the union, obviously, but getting to consistent snow is not available to us. And in the areas of our state when it's snowy time that have snow, there's no mountains. You can't ski in Texas. Mexico is the closest we have to like convenient skiing. And for me, that's 12 hours away. Nothing convenient about it. But so with all the things we talked about with you brewing on the cider, is there like, do you do New Year brewing resolutions? Like, do you have a goal this year to increase your volume or to upgrade equipment or to try new varieties or new beverages to brew? Like, what are your plans in a best case scenario for 2021 in brewing?
Equipment upgrades for sure. I got to get that beer gun. Yeah. That beer bottling gun. And it would be nice to move towards a closed system. So
you still do open transfers?
Yeah.
See, my lady, because like we get so much flack, my pop and I, when we transfer, because Todd does closed transfer, James does closed transfer, and then people see me on Instagram and like, you're just welcoming contaminants. And I'm like, yeah. And if it turns out bad, I'm never going to tell you. I'm going to be like, oh, this is the best beer ever. Choke it down. But have you had issues with contamination from open transfer?
I haven't had issues with contamination. I'm just interested to see if the flavor will change because of oxidation.
Interesting. Yeah. I liked it, the science behind, because you can probably pinpoint a lot better than the average bear when you have an off flavor. You're like, I know what did that and I know how to resolve that. As opposed to me, I'm texting James at 1 a.m, buzzed, like, why is my beer taste cardboard? Like, yes, well, let's go through your brew day, or let's go through your transfer, or let's go through your keg. Like there's a lot of areas where you can pinpoint it too. But when like, oh, that phenolic whatever, that's because of this, you can correct it the next batch, right?
Yeah. That's something that's beneficial about having a background in the sciences. Sensory sciences has become increasingly more so important to me, lesser on the drug development side and now more on the sensory science side.
And then as we wrap this episode up, and I appreciate all your time today. I know I took a lot of it and I apologize.
No, you're great.
But what is like your Instagram is where I discovered you. Maybe 2 years ago, I think y'all did that. You were part of that calendar that Heidi had set up. Was that last year or was that 2 years ago now?
I think that was 2 years ago.
Time flies. Oh my goodness. First off, the calendar, what a great idea. I don't know if I don't think they ever did it again. But y'all
we did. It was just without Heidi, unfortunately. She was busy at the time and she couldn't help us. But it was Michelle at the Brew Babe. She organized it and we did a second.
Is there one for this year?
There wasn't one. It was for last year that we did, but we didn't do one this year.
COVID probably. I blame COVID on everything that doesn't happen. Even when Todd calls me to ask me for the status of something, and I work remote by myself, not near anybody, and I'm like, oh, COVID, man, I would have had it done, but COVID, it stopped me. But your Instagram, I want to plug it, and I haven't, and I apologize, I haven't plugged it enough this show.
Great.
But the at Miss_cider, and it's MISS_cider. What led to the creation of that? Were you just trying to document, because this is very brew centric. You put personal life stuff on there, but it's almost always related to what you're doing with cider making or any of the concoctions that you're making. What was the idea behind starting it? And then also with that, what are your goals with it? Or, is it going to be this brand? Are you trying to make a cidery one day or just a website of information? How did it start and what are your plans?
It kind of morphed over time. It began as my personal Instagram account. And then the more that I got into cider making, the more that I enjoyed it. And I became, I changed it to a personal blog site. And then now I just kind of feel like it's kind of a mashup of the ciders that I enjoy, the ciders that I make, the process behind it. I really wanted to make it more scientific geared, but lately, especially because of COVID, it's just kind of been more lifestyle-y, lifestyles, cider, enjoying travel, enjoying the ciders that I find or the beers that I find during my travels. And yeah, like I said, as soon as I start making those equipment upgrades, you'll see that blasted all over that site.
I would love to see that. And also too, it got the wheels turning in my head. If we can ever collaborate, because the science side of it is what I think people are going to be most interested in. at the end of the day, like our how-to videos are exponentially more popular than our podcast episodes are on YouTube. Like when we have a how-to video brewing on this all-grain system that has 100-something thousand views, and then my episode gets like 10, and 8 of them are me, and the other 2 are my dad and then my mom clicking from their YouTube. People want to know how to do things. They want to know the science behind it, not just the jibber jabber that we do on the show. But maybe, we need to figure out a way to get either collaborative or how we can help sponsor that, because I think that would go over very well. Because again, you have the background. I'm trusting what you're saying because you speak so confidently. Like I do the whole fake it till you make it, but you actually are confident in what you're saying. So I trust what you're saying. The science side, that would be great. What, like with that, would you ever do a YouTube? Because I think that you would be able to tie the two pretty well together, especially if you're able to produce some videos from your LA apartment there. And you've got resources around you in LA, I am sure, for production.
I would consider it. I used to teach at the college level. So I already kind of know what goes into, setting up this kind of like lecture almost series. I know the time and effort that it takes to, set up these kind of like lesson planning kind of videos. So it's something that I played with in my mind in the past. I just haven't had the time to dedicate to it that I would like to give it, enough justice.
And that is true. I always speak from a very privileged point that I do this for a living, and it's different. When podcasting was just a passion project of mine and I was trying to make it a living, I was freelancing for Todd and trying to produce all these shows. You're right. It's a lot of effort to put in and polish. And then the most defeating thing is like, having a person I was producing a show for, like, well, what's our metrics this week? It's 80. And like, like 80,000? No, 80 people. And like, it doesn't become financially responsible for us to continue doing this, does it?
Yeah.
So I totally get that. But maybe we can collaborate in somehow in the future. When COVID is under control, we'll get you out to Texas and we could do a whole video series there. Have you been to Texas? I'm sure.
I haven't been to Texas, but I do have friends that have wanted me to come out to visit for sure.
See, we can kill 2 birds. Austin, I'm sure, or I don't know where area your friends are. Austin's a great cider scene. Texas is, it's all I know, but it's also the best state in the union, like I said. So it would be great to have you. But anyway, so yeah, wrapping it up, her Instagram is @miss_cider. Corrie, I can't thank you enough for your time this week and
for
humoring me in the small talk before the show. I really appreciate you not hanging up on me.
No. I enjoyed my time, my lunch hour, because I do have a full-time job for sure.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, so do I. Yeah, that's but anyways, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
And that will do it for this episode of the Homebrew Happy Hour. If you have a question you would like us to discuss on a future episode, you can go to homebrewhappyhour.com and click on that submit a question link at the top of the page. Or now you can call or text them in by using 325-305-6107. Like you heard at the top of the show, sign up for our inaugural Kölsch Cup and see if you can win our Grand Champion Trophy. Learn more at KölschCup.com and get a Kölsch recipe on us when you join our top tier at patreon.com/Homebrew Happy Hour. On behalf of Todd Burns, James Carlson, and the Pearl Media Network, I'm Joshua Stubing. Thank you for listening.
This program is made possible by the checkbook of Mr. Todd Burns and by contributions to our newly launched Patreon by viewers like you. Visit patreon.com/Homebrew Happy Hour and join our community. Thank you.